The air was thick with tension as we sat around the dinner table. Dad had insisted on having a family night, which usually meant he had something on his mind. I glanced at Leo, my husband, who seemed just as uneasy as I was. "So how's the shop doing?" Dad asked, his tone already carrying a hint of condescension. Leo cleared his throat. "It's been a little slow lately, but we're managing." Dad let out a dismissive snort. "Figures. You never did have the business acumen your brother had." I felt Leo tense beside me, his jaw clenching. Here we go again. "Gregory, that's enough," I said, trying to defuse the situation before it escalated. But Dad wasn't done. "If only you'd listened to me and taken that management job instead of chasing your little auto dream." He shook his head, his eyes narrowing. "Your brother would have known what to do." Leo slammed his fist on the table, making the plates rattle. "Don't bring Tim into this." "I'm just stating facts," Dad shot back. He was the smart one, the one with a real future. "Screw you, old man," Leo shouted, his face flushed with anger. "I'm sick of living in Tim's shadow." The kids stared wide-eyed, their food forgotten. I reached for Leo's hand, trying to calm him down, but he jerked away. "At least he didn't waste his potential like you," Dad sneered. "Maybe if you'd inherited his drive, you wouldn't be struggling to keep that rust bucket of a shop afloat." That did it. Leo shot up from his chair, his hands trembling. "You know what? I'm done. I've had it with your constant belittling and favoritism. Tim's gone, and it's time you accepted that I'm not him." Dad rose to his feet as well, his eyes blazing with fury. "How dare you speak to me like that, after everything I've done for this family?" "Everything you've done?" Leo let out a bitter laugh. "You mean like constantly reminding us how much of a disappointment I am? Thanks, but no thanks." I stood up, trying to intervene. "Guys, please, let's just—" But they were too fond, exchanging insults and accusations that cut deeper with each passing moment. As their voices rose, echoing off the walls, I realized this was more than just another argument. This was a breaking point, a long simmering resentment finally boiling over. And in that moment, I knew our family would never be the same. A few days had passed since the explosive dinner, and an uneasy silence had settled over our home. Leo and I treaded carefully around each other, both of us still reeling from the fallout with Dad. I was in the kitchen, absent-mindedly scrubbing dishes, when the doorbell rang. Drying my hands, I made my way to the front door and peered through the peephole. It was Dad. I steeled myself and opened the door, bracing for another confrontation. "What do you want?" Dad's expression was uncharacteristically somber. "We need to talk." "I don't think there's anything left to say," I replied coolly. "You made your feelings pretty clear the other night." He sighed, running a hand through his thinning gray hair. "I know, and I'm sorry for how I acted, but I have a proposal that could help us all." I crossed my arms, skeptical. "I'm listening." "With your mother gone, it gets lonely living by myself," he began. "And with Leo's shop struggling, I thought perhaps I could move in and lend a hand. Financially." I blinked, taken aback. "You want to move in? And give us money?" "Think about it," he pressed. "With my savings, I could help Leo get that loan he's been after. Get the shop back on its feet." It was a tempting offer. Money had been tight lately, and Leo's business was hanging by a thread. But after the way Dad had treated him, I wasn't sure if we could trust his motives. "I don't know, Dad," I said hesitantly. "After everything that's happened, how can we be sure this isn't just another way for you to meddle and criticize us?" He held up his hands. "I give you my word, no strings attached. This is a fresh start for all of us." I studied his face, searching for any hints of deception. Part of me wanted to believe him, but another part couldn't help but feel uneasy. "Let me talk to Leo about it," I said finally. "We'll think it over and let you know." Dad nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Of course. Just remember, I'm not getting any younger, and I want a chance to make things right before it's too late." As he turned and walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his proposal than he was letting on. That night, I broached the subject with Leo over dinner. "Your dad wants to move in?" he said incredulously. "And bankroll the shop?" I nodded. "That's what he claims, at least." Leo shook his head. "I don't trust him, Mara. Not after the way he's treated me all these years." "I know," I agreed. "But if he's serious about the money, it could be our only chance to save the business." Leo was silent for a long moment, weighing the options. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh. I guess we don't have much choice, but the second he starts meddling or pulling any of his usual crap, he's out. Understood? Understood, I said, hoping against hope that we weren't making a grave mistake. Little did we know, the real nightmare was just beginning. It didn't take long for Dad to move in, and almost immediately the atmosphere in our home shifted. His presence was suffocating, like a dark cloud hanging over us at all times. This place is a mess, he grumbled, surveying the living room with disdain. Didn't your mother teach you how to keep a proper house? I bit my tongue, reminding myself that getting into it with him would only make things worse. As the days went by, it became clear that Dad's no-strings-attached promise was nothing but empty words. He constantly criticized how I ran the household, from the way I cooked to how I disciplined the kids. You're too soft on them, he'd snap, glaring at me across the dinner table. No wonder they're so ill-behaved. The kids, sensing the tension, retreated into their rooms whenever Dad was around, only emerging when he wasn't home. Leo bore the brunt of Dad's derision, though. No matter how hard he worked at the shop, it was never good enough. I'm pulling in extra hours, trying to catch up on the backlog, Leo said one night, his voice weary. Dad scoffed. And how's that working out for you? Still can't seem to get ahead, can you? At least I'm trying, Leo shot back, his temper flaring. Which is more than I can say for you and your financial support. In a flash, Dad's expression turned thunderous. Watch your tone, boy. Don't forget who's keeping this sinking ship afloat. I stepped between them, dreading another explosive confrontation. Enough, both of you. We're all on edge, but fighting isn't going to solve anything. For a moment, it looked like Dad was going to press the issue. Then his face relaxed into a sickening smile that sent chills down my spine. You're right, Mara, he said, his voice deceptively calm. We're family, after all, and families should stick together, no matter what. The way he said those last few words, it was almost like a threat, a reminder that he held all the cards and we were at his mercy. In the following weeks, Dad's behavior only grew more erratic and disturbing. He'd make cryptic comments hinting at some deep, dark secret that could tear us all apart. You think you know someone, he'd say, his eyes boring into mine. But the truth is, we all have skeletons in our closets. I tried to brush it off, but his words gnawed at me, planting seeds of doubt and dread. What was he hiding? And more importantly, how far would he go to keep it buried? One night, I overheard a heated argument between Dad and Leo in the living room. Unable to resist, I crept closer, straining to make out their words. Can't keep living like this, Leo was saying, his voice strained. He's making our lives a living hell. Dad's response sent a chill down my spine. You'd better watch yourself, boy. You have no idea what I'm capable of. In that moment, I knew we were dealing with more than just a difficult houseguest. This was a man willing to do whatever it took to maintain his twisted hold over us. And as I retreated back upstairs, my heart pounding, I realized we were in way over our heads. The tension in our home had become unbearable. Every interaction with Dad felt like a ticking time bomb, liable to explode at any moment. I walked on eggshells, never knowing when his next outburst or veiled threat would come. One afternoon, while the kids were at school and Leo was working late at the shop, I decided to tidy up Dad's room. As I straightened up his nightstand, a loose floorboard caught my eye. Curious, I bent down and pried it up, revealing a hidden compartment underneath. Inside was a tattered notebook, its pages yellowed and worn. Against my better judgment, I opened it and began to read. The entries detailed Dad's gambling habits, how he'd squandered away large sums of money at the casino, chasing increasingly risky bets. My heart sank as I realized the extent of his addiction and how deeply in debt he must have been. But it was the final entry that made my blood run cold. The money for Leo's loan is gone, it read in Dad's shaky scrawl. I couldn't stop myself. I've ruined everything. They'll never forgive me for this. I sat there, numb, as the pieces fell into place. Dad's insistence on moving in, his constant belittling of Leo. It was all a ploy to make amends for betraying his own son in the worst way possible. Suddenly, his veiled threats and erratic behavior made sense. He was a man consumed by guilt and desperation, lashing out in a futile attempt to regain control. I don't know how long I sat there, the weight of Dad's betrayal crushing down on me. When I finally rose to my feet, my hands were trembling and I felt nauseous. That night, when Leo came home, I could barely look him in the eye. "Hey, what's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I opened my mouth, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I tell him the truth, that his own father had stolen from him, dashing his dreams out of sheer selfishness? "Mara?" Leo pressed. "You're scaring me. What happened?" Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. "It's your dad. I found something in his room today. Something he's been keeping from us." I proceeded to recount what I'd discovered in the notebook, watching as Leo's expression morphed from confusion to disbelief to a white-hot rage. "That son of a bitch," he seethed, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. "After everything he's put me through, this is how he repays me? By stealing from his own flesh and blood?" "Leo, I'm so sorry," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I had no idea he'd stoop this low. "Don't apologize for him," Leo spat. "He's the one who should be groveling, begging for forgiveness. But he won't get it. Not from me. Not after this." As he paced the room, his anger radiating off him in waves, I knew there was no going back. The fragile truce we'd formed with Dad was shattered beyond repair. And in that moment, I made a decision, one that would change the course of our family forever. "We can't let him get away with this," I said, my voice steely with resolve. "It's time we fought back. It's time we took our lives back from that miserable old man." Leo looked at me, his eyes burning with a mix of pain and determination. "What did you have in mind?" A plan was already taking shape in my mind, a way to expose Dad's lies and machinations to everyone he'd ever wronged. "Trust me," I said, placing a hand on his arm. "By the time I'm done, he'll finally get the karma he deserves." In the days following my discovery of Dad's betrayal, a fire was lit within me. I couldn't stand idly by while he continued to manipulate and undermine our family. It was time to take him down, once and for all. The first step was gathering allies. I knew I couldn't take on Dad alone. His web of deceit ran too deep. I needed people who had seen firsthand the kind of man he truly was. My first stop was the auto parts store downtown, where I tracked down Mark, an old friend of Leo's late brother Tim. He and Dad had been close once, before a bitter falling out that nobody dared speak of. "Mara?" Mark's eyes widened when he saw me. "It's been years. What brings you by?" "It's about your ex-friend, Gregory," I said, getting straight to the point. "The lies, the manipulation, the way he treats Leo and the rest of us. I'm guessing you know all about that." Mark's expression darkened. "That son of a bitch. After what he did to Tim, I'm not surprised he's still up to his old tricks." "Then you'll help me expose him?" I pressed. "Make him pay for all the lives he's destroyed?" Mark was silent for a moment, mulling it over. Finally he nodded. "You know I'm in. That bastard has it coming, and then some." With Mark on board, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. If anyone knew the depths of Dad's depravity, it was him. Next, I reached out to some of Dad's old poker buddies, the ones he'd inevitably swindled money from over the years. One by one, they agreed to join my cause, each with their own score to settle. As my makeshift alliance grew, so did my confidence. We spent nights poring over evidence, building an airtight case against Dad that would leave no room for doubt or denial. "The key is to hit him where it hurts most," Mark advised. "His ego, his reputation, his sense of control, that's what matters to scumbags like him." And then it hit me. The perfect way to bring Dad's world crashing down around him, while ensuring maximum public humiliation. His 70th birthday party. Every year, Dad made a big production out of his birthday, inviting all his old friends and former associates for a lavish celebration. This time, we'd be the ones delivering the surprise. "We'll gather everyone who's ever had a bone to pick with that miserable old coot," I told the group. "Friends, family, business associates, the whole lot. And then, right in the middle of his big night, we'll spring the truth on him." The looks on their faces said it all. This was the reckoning Dad had been due for years, maybe decades. By the time we were done, he'd have nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide. As the party date approached, the anticipation was palpable. We triple-checked every scrap of evidence, every witness testimony, leaving no stone unturned. Finally, the night arrived, and I could barely contain my nerves as guests began to trickle in. Dad, oblivious to our plot, greeted them all with his usual false bravado, soaking up the attention like a narcissistic sponge. Little did he know, his reign of terror was about to come to a crashing halt. Once we were done, there would be no more lies, no more manipulation, only the cold, hard truth, laid bare for all to see. I caught Mark's eye from across the room, and he gave me a subtle nod. It was go time. Steeling myself, I stepped forward, cleared my throat, and prepared to unleash a lifetime's worth of secrets and betrayals. "Excuse me, everyone. There's something you all need to hear." The room fell silent as all eyes turned towards me. Dad's expression morphed from confusion to outright suspicion. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves. "For years, you've lied, manipulated, and betrayed everyone in this room," I began, my voice ringing out clearly. "You've stolen money, ruined lives, and passed it off as tough love. But no more. Tonight, the truth comes out." A murmur rippled through the crowd as I held up the tattered notebook, the damning evidence of Dad's gambling addiction and subsequent betrayal. In these pages, you'll find a detailed account of how Gregory Sanderson systematically squandered away his life savings, including the money meant for his son's business loan, I said, letting the weight of those words sink in. Dad's face had drained of all color. "Mara, you don't know what you're talking about," he sputtered. "That notebook is nothing but lies." "That's not all." Mark stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "How about the way you turned your back on Tim in his time of need, or how you've made Leo's life a living hell, tearing him down at every turn?" Other voices began to chime in, a chorus of accusations and grievances that had been bottled up for far too long. "You cheated me out of my retirement fund in that crooked poker game. You sold my business out from under me when times got tough. After Mom died, you became a completely different person. Cruel, vindictive, utterly heartless." Dad swiveled wildly, trying in vain to deny each and every claim, but we had him cornered, backed into a corner by the weight of his own misdeeds. "This is outrageous," he roared, his face flushed with impotent rage. "I'm your father, damn it! You can't treat me like this." In that moment, I felt a surge of pity for the pathetic, broken man before me. This was his true legacy, a lifetime of burned bridges and shattered trust, all in service of his own bloated ego. "We're done being your punching bags," I said, my voice heavy with finality. "You've tormented this family for the last time. Please, you have to understand." Dad blubbered, his bravado evaporating as he cast a desperate look around the room, searching for any shred of sympathy or support. But he found none. Only the cold, impassive stares of a dozen people he'd wronged, their respect for him shattered beyond repair. "Get out," Leo spoke up, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Get out of our home, get out of our lives. You're dead to us." A heavy silence descended as Dad's gaze met mine, his eyes pleading for mercy. But I felt nothing, no pity or remorse, only a sense of grim satisfaction that justice had finally been served. With one final defiant glare, Dad turned and stormed out, the smattering of jeers and laughter following him out the door. We'd done it. Against all odds, we'd torn down the facade and exposed the monster underneath for all to see. As the crowd erupted into raucous cheers and applause, I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile. The nightmare was finally over. Dad's reign of terror had come to an end, undone by his own hubris and greed. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again, like a crushing weight had been lifted from my shoulders. As Leo pulled me into a fierce embrace, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together, united as a family, free from Dad's toxic influence at last. It was a new beginning, paid for with the truth and the unraveling of a lifetime's worth of lies. And it was all worth it. In the aftermath of Dad's humiliating exposure, an eerie silence settled over our home. It was as if a dark cloud had finally lifted, allowing us to breathe freely for the first time in years. Leo and I sat on the couch, still processing the events of the night before. The kids were at school, blissfully unaware of the drama that had unfolded. "I can't believe it's really over," Leo murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "After everything he put us through." I squeezed his hand, offering a reassuring smile. "We did what we had to do. He brought this on himself." A knock at the door made us both tense, old habits dying hard. Leo rose to answer it, hand poised as if ready for a confrontation. It was Mark, a grim look etched onto his weathered features. "You guys better see this," he said, holding up his phone. On the screen was a news article, the headline blaring in bold letters, "Local businessman disowned after sordid scandal exposed at birthday party." Leo and I leaned in, devouring every scathing detail. It seemed one of Dad's so-called friends had tipped off the local paper about the events of the previous night, spilling all the sordid details of his deception and betrayal. The article didn't hold back, painting a damning portrait of a once-respected man brought low by his own greed and cruelty. By the time we reached the end, a sickening knot had formed in the pit of my stomach. "They're crucifying him," Leo muttered, his expression unreadable. A part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, knowing that Dad was finally being held accountable for his actions. But another part couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. This was a man I'd once looked up to, a father figure now reduced to a cautionary tale. In the days that followed, the fallout only intensified. Old friends and associates cut ties with Dad, his reputation in tatters. Even his own remaining family members wanted nothing to do with him, disgusted by his betrayal. He tried reaching out, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails pleading for a chance to explain himself. But we never responded, never opened that door again. As far as we were concerned, Gregory Sanderson was dead to us. With Dad gone, it was like a weight had been lifted from our shoulders. Leo threw himself into rebuilding the auto shop, finally able to focus without his father's constant belittling. The kids, sensing the shift in the household's mood, became more relaxed and carefree. It was like watching them come back to life. And me, I savored every moment, reveling in the newfound peace and harmony that had been so cruelly denied to us for far too long. Still, I couldn't quite shake the nagging feeling that Dad was out there somewhere, stewing in his own bitterness and remorse. A part of me wondered if he'd ever truly understand the depth of his transgressions, or if he'd simply double down on his victimhood. Those thoughts plagued me late one night as I lay awake, listening to the steady breathing of Leo beside me. In the stillness, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. "Speak of the devil." Against my better judgment, I stepped into the hallway and played the message, Dad's gravelly voice filling the silence. "Mara," he rasped, his tone tinged with desperation. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please, you have to let me explain. What you saw, what you think you know about me, it's only half the story." He paused, as if struggling to find the right words. "I made mistakes, horrible mistakes that I'll regret until the day I die. But there were reasons, extenuating circumstances that pushed me to the brink. If you'd only give me a chance, I could make you understand." The message clicked off, leaving me standing there in stunned silence. A part of me was tempted to delete it, to purge Dad's pleas from my life once and for all. But something held me back, a niggling sense of doubt. What if there was more to his story? What if, in our pursuit of vengeance, we'd missed a crucial piece of the puzzle? I stood there for a long moment, mulling over my options. Finally, I made a decision, one that would either offer my fractured family a shot at healing or tear open old wounds all over again. Taking a deep breath, I hit redial and pressed the phone to my ear, my heart pounding as it began to ring. No matter what came next, I owed it to myself to hear the whole truth, even if it destroyed me. The line clicked, and my heart jumped into my throat. "Dad, it's me." There was a long pause, as if he couldn't quite believe I was calling. "Mara? I got your message," I said, pushing past the lump in my throat. "And against my better judgment, I'm going to hear you out. But I need you to understand, whatever you say isn't going to change anything. We're still done." Another heavy silence stretched between us, charged with unspoken tension and too many years of hurt. "Fair enough," he said at last, his voice little more than a rasp. "You deserve the truth, no matter how painful it might be." He took a shuddering breath, as if bracing himself. "It all started after your mother passed." For the next hour, Dad laid everything bare, the crippling grief and loneliness that had driven him into the arms of his gambling addiction. The mounting debts, the desperation that led him to make that fateful decision to dip into Leo's loan money. "I never intended to betray him like that," Dad insisted, his words tinged with remorse. "I thought I could win it all back before anyone was the wiser, but I got in too deep, and by the time I realized my mistake, it was too late." He He spoke of his shame, his cowardice in moving in with us instead of coming clean right away, how the guilt had slowly twisted him into the monster we'd come to know. I took my anger out on you, on Leo, because it was easier than facing the truth, that I'd become the greatest failure a father could be. As his tale unfolded, a part of me felt a strange sense of pity welling up. Here was a broken, pathetic old man laying his soul bare, owning up to his failings in a desperate bid for what? Redemption? Absolution? When he finally fell silent, I found myself at a loss for words. Part of me wanted to unleash the full force of my fury, to remind him of the lives he'd shattered beyond repair. But another part, the part that still faintly remembered the man he used to be, strong, proud, commanding respect, felt something else entirely. Regret. "Why didn't you just tell us the truth from the beginning?" I asked, my voice little more than a whisper. "Why did you let it go this far?" "Would you have listened?" he shot back, a flicker of his old defiance shining through. "Or would you have just seen it as another failure, more proof that the great Gregory Sanderson was a worthless drunk squandering his final years away?" His words hung heavy in the air, and I realized with a sinking feeling that he was right. We'd made too many assumptions, been too eager to paint him as the villain. We were all guilty in our own way. I trailed off, struggling to find the right response. In the end, I settled for a simple truth. "I'm sorry, Dad. Sorry we didn't give you a chance, that we just assumed the worst." An eternity seemed to pass before he finally spoke again. "No, kiddo," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Don't apologize. Not after everything I put you through. If anyone deserves a reckoning, it's me." I could hear the acceptance in his tone, the resignation of a man who had finally made peace with his demons. "Maybe it's for the best," he continued. "You and Leo, you've got a real chance to start fresh now, build the life you deserve without my toxicity weighing you down." My throat tightened at the thought of never seeing him again, of shutting that door forever. But I knew, deep down, that he was right. Sometimes, breaking a family apart is the only way to save what's left of it. "Take care of yourself, Dad," I choked out, the words almost sticking in my throat. And I forgive you." There was a soft intake of breath on the other end, like a weight finally being lifted. "Thank you," he whispered. That's all I needed to hear." The line went dead, and I was left alone with the silence and a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Grief, anger, relief. It all swirled together into a confusing jumble. But one truth rang clear above the rest. It was finally, truly over. Dad's specter had been exorcised, leaving us free to forge our own path forward. As the dawn light crept through the curtains, I rejoined Leo in bed, snuggling close and savoring the warmth of his embrace. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, the promise of a fresh start glimmering on the horizon. It would be a long road, strewn with lingering hurts and hard-earned lessons. But we would walk it together, a family reforged in the fire of hard truths and even harder choices. And no matter what the future held, I knew one thing for certain. The cycle of hatred and bitterness ended here. A new day was dawning, rife with possibilities, and I intended to greet it with open arms.